as the time progressed and we became more insecure as economies and tried to protect our economies more, but at the global level, we talk about multilateralism. So, there is this dichotomy between multilateralism and how we operate as economies. That's the main reason that, world has been trying to come towards a global accepted framework, but then the powers and the influence behind these frameworks comes from few, I would say, powerful economies of the world, where the real voice and the real challenges of the developing economies are not being put well in front.
For instance, the point on decent work, that's one of the 7 principles of cooperatives. So this is what cooperatives are. So in that sense, it's no news for the cooperative movement and cooperative studies, because that can be important for other type of businesses, other type of organizations that operate under a different rationale. But for cooperatives, this is what they are. I don't I don't care if it's ambitious or not. We need to do something. Otherwise, we won't have a world where we could live in a couple of years' time.
Mm.
So, and if no one or the people really in a powerful positions don't recognize this urgency, um, we are really in a big problem.
Invisible Experts Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Sustainable Talk Show, which is part of our Invisible Experts podcast. And today, we are honored to explore the SDGs with two fantastic and incredible guests. Yash Ranga, a practitioner with extensive experience in driving sustainable initiatives at Pixera Global, and Paola Raffaelli, an academic specializing in sustainable economics and cooperatives, whose insights will enrich this conversation. Both, I could say, they are friends of mine, and I'm happy to have you here. How are you guys? How's it going?
Pleasure, Andres, and it's such an honor to be back here. And I always love the energy, the leadership, and the energy you bring in the conversation. So I'm really excited about the most timely conversation right after the climate week. So as we are entering into 2025, I think this is a perfect time to do some deliberations and see, how we as academicians, practitioners can chart the way forward for the world we deserve and the world we need. So really looking forward. And Paula, it's a pleasure to be with you on this panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice meeting you, and thank you, Andres, for inviting us and gathering us. So it will be a great opportunity for knowing us, and discussing things that are very relevant. So yeah, very happy to be here.
That's cool. That's cool, guys. Listen, the reason why I wanted to create this duo is because, Josh is a practitioner, as I said before, and you, Paola, can bring also this kind of insight from the academic perspective. And, like speaking with Raj in many events, we always agree that academia has to talk more with practitioners. We are so far away from them. I don't know, it's sometimes we feel a little comfortable from our desks, and we need to get out there and see what's going on and see life, from the actual hands-on perspective. So if you guys don't mind, just to contextualize our community, Paola, can you tell us a little bit about you, what you up to, and what's your experience in this sector?
Yes. Well, I started my academic career because of that the shock of reality. So I am originally from Argentina, and when I had to decide what to study, it was the time when my country was going through the worst socioeconomic crisis till now. because probably it will happen again. Um, and I mean, I was finishing school the year when the streets were packed of, I mean, my parents were going out on the streets and expressing the unhappiness because of the socioeconomic context or the situation we were in. Um, so it was not just like a minority group doing demonstrations. It was the whole society, me as a middle class child, or well, teenager. So yeah, so then I was totally captivated by that and decided to study sociology. And then when I was finishing my university, I started to study cooperatives and the specific cooperative form that we have in Argentina, which is reclaimed enterprises, empresas recuperadas. Um, and that was really the door that led me to discover the social economy as a different way to understand the economy and the relationship that we establish with the world, environment, the nature. Um, so yeah, I did a PhD, and then yeah, now I am professor in business ethics because I have a slightly different view on businesses. We will discuss it probably later, so I will stop here. But
That's
this is me.
great. Thank you for this. Yeah, I know I've met Paola in many different conferences, and your work is really inspiring. It's very interesting, and that's why I'm pretty sure our little community will learn from it. Josh, Josh was actually our third guest in our podcast. And
Experienced.
yeah, and I told him we had a really good feedback. I mean, of course this kind of topic is a niche, right? I mean, we wouldn't have such a big voice, but I like to think we create impact and some questioning in our niche, right? And few of our community people, commented on Josh's podcast and they love it. So, Josh, how are you, man? Tell us about you, what you up to, and how do you describe yourself?
I would say I'm always unstoppable because the reason you have to be unstoppable because things around you in the macroeconomic space or the macro space is so daunting that if you don't keep yourself unstoppable as an individual, we really first become the victims of all the challenges that the world is grappling with. So that's why I always say that, we have to be unstoppable. And I would say, Andres, like it's a very interesting time the world is going through because at one end we speak about all the progresses that the world is making, but the moment we go into the depth of the each subject, we see that the space is dark, and especially with the growing geopolitical disturbances, the wars, the displacement, world has seen the highest percentage of displaced population in the world. So it's an crazy time, I would say. But I would say interesting because this time is a phase in the history of the humankind when the right decisions, right leadership, and right kind of collaboration and partnerships and spaces like this space that you create for us to come share learn from our peers can really shape the face of the future world that we are working towards. So I think it's at one point it's painful, but also that is a constructive pain because that pain allows us and at least myself to carve out a more important, a more conscious, and a more insurgent role as an individual, as a leader that I should take to make the world a better place. So, we all have been part of while we are working in our spaces of these frameworks, and SDG framework is one of the other frameworks, but it's an holistic, comprehensive framework that we all, reference to in different contexts of our work. And it's very relevant to see where we are in 2024, and we are just about to end 24 and enter 25. So in next 5 years, how does the collective wisdom, given the reality of the shape of the world, can come together and get as close as possible to the world we dream of? So that's what I am excited about. That's what I am really conscious about. And I look forward in all the conversations, in all the actions that we do to become better than who we were yesterday.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Yash. So today in this episode, we will dive into the SDGs progress, challenges, criticisms, and even some of the conspiracy theories surrounding them. Okay. So the first segment, I want to talk about the achievements of the SDGs. There are some facts, some statistics, for instance, in terms of global poverty reduction, right? It seems like extreme poverty has dropped from 10%. This is according to the latest report in 2015, and it dropped from 10% down to 8.4, which is fantastic. So they make a study in between 2015, sorry, and 2022. So it dropped from 10 down to 84. But of course, it's still challenging, right? Because about 700 million people still live on less than $1.90 a day, according to the World Bank. In terms of climate action, we could see a lot of advances. For instance, in terms of renewable energy, which has grown by 2.4% annually since 2015, which is pretty good. So still, the CO2 emissions has risen by 0.9%. This is according to the last report of UNEP in 2022, which is still some challenges, right? And in terms of education, for instance, there have been some progress, although, of course, there are some challenges. No, out of school children decreased by still to about almost 300 million, still lack access to educating globally, according to UNESCO. So, there is a lot of things that happened in the world with this framework of the SDGs. So I want to start with Paola. From your academic perspective, how have cooperatives contributed to the SDG progress, particularly in reducing inequalities, no? Which is the SDG 10, or perhaps promoting decent work, the SDG 8?
Well, I mean, yeah, definitely making progress in having a more equal world. It's a good news, definitely. From a cooperative perspective, what I see is that the SDG framework really is what cooperatives are in essence. Of course, the SDG is much more comprehensive, and it includes life below water, and a cooperative might not be related to that. But for instance, the point on decent work, that's one of the 7 principles of cooperatives. So this is what cooperatives are. So in that sense, it's no news for the cooperative movement and cooperative studies, because that can be important for other type of businesses, other type of organizations that operate under a different rationale. But for cooperatives, this is what they are. And I think that is what they are because cooperatives have a very close connection with the space where they are embedded, where they operate. So a cooperative cannot say tomorrow, okay, it's too expensive to produce in Europe. Let's move to the global south, because that goes totally. I mean, the members of the cooperatives would never vote for that. So in that way, the SDGs, it's not really. They represent cooperatives' nature essence, um, and actually I think that is why the UN has named for second time in 10, 15 years, 2025 as a new year of cooperatives, because definitely they see the potential that cooperatives can bring to advancing and moving the SDG agenda forward, because they are very totally aligned, I would say. Yeah. So you were mentioning, for instance, I mean, the education and all that. It's not something that is really children education, no? Relevant for cooperative or the majority of cooperatives. There might be a cooperative school, but it's a special case, I would say. So from my area of expertise, which is worker cooperatives, production cooperatives, that type, more related towards work. So you were mentioning renewable energies. Sorry, and I think the key thing is to discuss what are we using that energy for. Is it for supporting an economic system that puts growth as the goal that we need to achieve, or we are using that energy for supporting or for actually, I don't know, heating people houses in the winter. So in that sense, yeah, I mean, it's better. Yes, it is indeed. But yeah, maybe my criticism, my critical thinking goes a step beyond that, and questioning what is behind that very good figure, and are we sure that that represents what we are aiming for, and but in relation to what Josh was saying about building the world that we want to build. Yeah, so I totally want that to happen, and I absolutely share the idea that it is a crucial time, and when the old is not already dead, and the new is not ready to be born, so it's a transition time, or at least I feel it that way.
So do
Um,
you reckon? So do you reckon, for instance, the SDG framework perhaps pushed cooperative to a more positive environment and ecosystem in terms of finance, in terms of perhaps attraction? Like in Spain, for instance, they have this massive cooperative that they basically provide energy, which is called Some Energia. They have about 5,000 members, which is very interesting. So do
mhm.
you think the framework favored the cooperative ecosystem, or do you
Well,
think it's the same?
no, hopefully. I mean, if the economic system changes towards a less marketized framework view,
But till
that,
now, do you think it helped or not really?
I don't know.
It's hard to say, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, the final goal could be good, could be better. But yeah, again, we are halfway through, so
Sure, sure.
it's very difficult to say in that way. But yeah, going back to your original question, I think really the SDGs match very well with cooperative principles. So, if you say to a cooperativist, "What about decent work?" they would probably laugh, because this is what we have been doing for 200 years, and you just
Yeah,
discover it now, you know.
sure.
Um, but yeah, I think that special connection that cooperatives have with the location where they are, that strong identity with uh, uh, the area, uh, that is something that that makes cooperatives a unique type of business um, for advancing the. I mean, 10% of the world population participate somehow in a cooperative. So,
Wow.
I mean, in that way, of course, many more working for companies, but yeah, I think in that way that can advance and can contribute to make the transition faster. But yeah, it's all what cooperatives have been doing since forever.
Yeah, so we could say like the SDGs is kind of like a projection. Some of the
Hmm.
SDGs are the projection of cooperative ecosystem values, right?
Yeah, it's a different way of understanding the economy in a much yeah.
Collaborative way, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Josh, for instance, from your experience, right? Like you've been working in different, let's say, ecosystems, and you've met a lot of businesses that they try to create social value or environmental value. Would you mind to share perhaps some examples of how businesses or some initiatives you've worked with have implemented SDGs effectively, and how do you actually can measure their impact when you looked into the SDG framework?
Sure, Andres. So first of all, I would really like to share that, and as we know that SDG is just an holistic framework, and as Paula said, like cooperative has been following, I would say, more than 80% of the SDG framework, except for few new addendums that the recent world has been grappling with, has been practicing it and been living it in and out for over 200 years now. So, the as the time progressed and we became more insecure as economies and tried to protect our economies more, but at the global level we talk about multilateralism. So there is this dichotomy between multilateralism and how we operate as economies. That's the main reason that world has been trying to come towards a global accepted framework, but then the powers and the influence behind these frameworks comes from few, I would say, powerful economies of the world, where the real voice and the real challenges of the developing economies are not being put well in front. So I think that's why we always think about how are we progressing versus we have not progressed. But like businesses, social enterprises, solidarity businesses, NGOs have been practicing most of these principles of SDGs from a very long time. And just to give you one example specific, I after my academics, I always believed in the power of business to transform communities. And when I say transformation is just not economic terms. Transformation is holistic term. It can't be having access to ABC makes you transformed. Transformed is a systemic process. And I always believe that the biggest force the world has created is business to bring that systemic change. But somehow, in quest of owning an individual owning the most of the power, has got us deviated from the real core and essence, and capitalistic approach has taken over the entire entire gamut of developmental challenges in the world. And right now there is a big debate in between NGOs, academia, governments, that we really need to localize the international development aid, because all these international development aids have been designed, planned very systematically to create more disparities rather than to bridge the gap. So this has always existed as this whole agency of capitalism has taken over, and the role of such a potent system like cooperative has been kept silence for ages now. Now when 2024 has came, the system, the multilateral systems like UN has decided or revisited that cooperatives can play a big role to achieve SDGs. As Paula said, like 1 billion members in the world are part of directly, indirectly cooperatives, and the combined revenue of top 300 cooperatives is more than $3 trillion, which is
Mm.
more than the annual budget of several economies of G20 countries, G20
Yeah.
members. So that kind of potent system has been quiet, dormant, not been part and integrated into the international agendas like SDG and the global development. That's a flaw. That's a systemic flaw. And businesses in different capacities has always contributed to so-called the major principles of equity, no poverty, zero hunger, decent growth. One example I would like to share and where we met like was Jaipur Rugs, and that's how I started my journey in the social impact space, where the founder always believes that businesses cannot be isolated from their role in environment they operate and with the communities which they operate. Businesses are by design related to the diversified nature of the human system, and that's is the role of business. While you are doing business, you are not only just creating livelihoods, but you are also consciously ensuring that the impact of the creation of livelihoods on the environment that you're operating in is also in ways can be should be regenerative. But in our quest to maximize profit, we tend to ignore those. The oil and gas industry 50 years ago knew that the climate crisis will come, but they kept quiet. Why? Because everybody wanted to maximize profits, maximize as much as you can till the time you come under radar or till the time things get messed up. You continue to exploit those resources. So that's the imbalance that has really caused the trouble that we are all now subjected to. But again, Jaipur Rugs is a successful business model that has maximized profits, wealth, but also created social capital, social wealth, and also consciously operated their businesses in a way that is not detrimental to the environment that they operate in. So, creating livelihoods for these 40,000 women in 600 villages, impoverished communities where there is lack of access to even basic amenities. So the I would say the choice of leadership to go in those trouble areas and to create opportunities is again the power of business. Business can be an agent for world benefit. Business should be an agent for world benefit. And somehow the dynamics of the global financial system, the financial economic infrastructure of the world, which is in today's term irrelevant, dysfunctional, and it has not able to bring the required financial socio-economic transformation that they were supposed to bring because of this financial infrastructure. So I think the biggest challenge is there. Why? Because there is no voice, no participation in decision making from
Mm.
the vulnerable countries, vulnerable communities of the world. The disadvantaged communities and the countries that represent those communities have no voice, no seat in those financial structures. So that's why all the planning decisions are, like decided in a more colonized way, and that's why the world is talking about how do we decolonize impact, how we decolonize social development. So I think these are some more relevant deeper subjects that we should be focusing on, is that how do you create a bridge, because we can't isolate what we say now. Businesses are bad, like let's focus on more impetus on cooperatives or social solidarity economy, where social enterprises, cooperatives, mutuals, and all come in play. But the world can't operate in silo. It's a whole system, and everything needs to coexist in a systemic way with the symbiotic relationship that one feeds as an inputs to other, and that output is another input to the whole system, which is regenerative. So I think that's the time where we need to bring back the force of business in that way. And again, the progress that we see in the reduction in child mortality is because of the development in good medications, the good R&Ds that has reduced the child mortality rate. We see the cost of remittances across the world has reduced, which is a great success. We see that 5.8 or so, sort of two-thirds of the world population have access to broadband now. How is it all possible? It is possible because of the power of businesses, right? And these has impacted the SDGs. These has created livelihoods. These have reduced poverty. They have created more access to good water, good sanitation. They have created access to other infrastructural changes, but I would say in isolation. There has been lack of proper partnership, collaborative ecosystem between the all the players of the system, and that has led to so-called, the limitations that we would be more talking about, where these SDGs are limiting and why these SDGs were made, and all those kind of um, you know policies and those kinds of cases were made, are being made against SDGs. So I'll share more about it. But again, I still believe that business has that transformative power. Business has played that role, but it has got, I would say, in a negative connotation when it comes to business representation, because they operated in silos. So I think it's time for us to break those silos and bridge the gap between the relation of business and the relation of the system with the business, because just government and business is not system. Communities, the biodiversity comprisingly makes the system, and the voices of nature. In one of these COPs, they were talking that the biodiversity is also a important stakeholder when we talk about environmental crisis. And how do you bring the voices of biodiversity in the decisions while you make in your ESG strategy, or while the decision you make in your carbon emission strategy? So these are very relevant topics that we need to focus when we think about these global frameworks, I guess.
Can
Sure,
I?
sure.
Can
Yeah,
I? No, because Josh was saying this about the silos, and I think that is very related to the market mentality about like competition, and in that way, I also that's why I also think that cooperatives can contribute in this transformation that you were mentioning, not only in economic terms because they are businesses, but also in seeing beyond that mentality rationale, and recognizing that other ways of doing businesses are possible, and actually collaboration. This is something that, I mean, all the organizations in the social economy collaborate among themselves. No one really thinks that it's sufficiently enough for addressing a big issue related to the community. Um, yeah, so I think the transformation needs to be really much systemic, as you said. Yes, totally.
And collaborative, like
Mhm.
we need to bring more collaboration in this transition towards transformation, I
Yeah,
believe.
it's not
sure.
an individual role. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure, frameworks as the SDG, which is a consequence of the Millennium objectives. I mean, in a way, they kind of like expose different sectors that they've been basically inhabiting the same ecosystem. Josh puts it in a very beautiful way. It's like, okay, everybody is codependent of one to another, right? So SDGs, I think so far, what it's doing is exposing that every sector, it doesn't matter their specialities, they are contributing to the ecosystem in a positive and in a negative way. So can we all together, with this era of information, can learn from each other and try to improve, right? So far, and according to the latest reports, since the introduction of the Millennium Goals and then the SDGs, which are the latest, there are some progress, right, across the board, right? And businesses, as Josh puts it, can do more. So rather than demonize them, even like cooperative, right? They could actually like be like active factors in order to enhance the socioeconomic and environmental sector across the world, right? And this is very important because I think what is happening now, and I think it's super relevant, what the next segment about the challenges, is that perhaps nowadays ideology in a way kind of taking over either private businesses or cooperatives. And, from the ideological point of view, there are some tensions that have emerged recently, right? It's like, let's say, private, orthodox uh, business businesses versus socially oriented eco businesses, and they kind of like they're antagonistic. They're one versus another, and it's kind of being legitimized by this ideological thinking. What I'm trying to say is like, okay, businesses, especially in the West, I don't know what is happening in Southeast Asia or some Asian countries or sub-Saharan countries. It's like, okay, private businesses which are more orthodox are from the right, and then social businesses which include social enterprises, social businesses, cooperatives are from the left. And if you don't actually like are think alike or you criticize both ideologies, this is bad and this is good, right? And this is one of part of the challenges that I want to talk in this next section, which is the challenges and the criticism of the SDGs, So according to the latest report, there are three key challenges that have been discussing or debating in conferences and from the practice side, from the academic side. Is one, funding gap, right? Especially developing countries face a shortfall of 2.5 trillion annually to meet the SDGs goals, according to the latest UNCTAD report. Also, in terms of global inequality, still 80% of the SDG funding benefits wealthier nations, and they still like failing to actually like let's say giving this part of the SDGs funding to the developing countries. And of course the COVID-19, right? It makes an impact and in a way reverse progress. And it kind of pushed about 97 million, it was the latest factor, more people into poverty, according to the UN. So based on the challenges and criticism, I want to ask Paola first, what challenges have you observed in aligning cooperatives with broad SDG frameworks, perhaps such as reporting impact or engaging smaller cooperatives?
Mhm. So, well, yeah, I particularly study cooperatives in the global south, in yeah, South America. Although I studied in the UK, and but the picture is quite different, and actually how they understand themselves is quite different. Um, yes. So in South America, the issue of funding is is an issue for anyone, I would say. Um, but what I see is the challenges they face are much more related to the urgency and the need to survival, which is totally related with funding and inequality intertwined. Um, and actually, yeah, I mean, it's those who are in the global south are probably the those that have been more affected by climate events, um, and the ecological consequences of the the crisis, the systemic crisis that we are living. So as Josh said, the SDGs are a framework. And what I see is that among the challenges, what I see is that this framework sometimes is very, very, very far from the grounds, particularly in the global south. And well, if a cooperative is struggling to survive and to pay wages at the end of the month, um, ecological crisis is really not an issue for them. Whereas I saw that in the UK is much more, they are more aware of the situation, and they actually have decided to use non-polluting chemicals because of their awareness, but also because they are able to afford that extra extra expenditure. So yeah, it's but the funding and inequality is something that is not only affects cooperatives, it goes
Beyond.
to all um small businesses. And cooperatives, yes, they are small business type, although there are massive cooperatives, like the bank cooperatives are huge, but in general cooperatives are quite small. So what I see is this distance between the institutional context where this framework has been developed and the reality that happens in the ground. So and there is a lack of financing and the lack of recognition from the governments, but also from what this what Jas also was pointing very wisely, the society. I mean, when I said I was studying cooperatives to my family, friends, some years, many years ago, they were just saying, "Oh, okay, but that's just a tiny thing, right?" Well, actually, no, but you don't know it until you see the variety, diversity, and how the impact that they make to the economy. But people tend to think that it's a small niche or because there is a huge bias or uh, not recognition of the contribution, and only also because when we see, well, when we study business, and this is something that happens in business schools, me being an academic in a business school, it's that we only study for-profit businesses, but by saying businesses we assume for profit. And when I say to my students, okay, businesses is any organization operating in the economy, and that goes beyond the market, that is a huge expansion of the definition of businesses, right? And I think cooperatives go contribute in that expansion. But about the challenges, I would say, the urgency and the survival. So in many cases, they are much more, they are facing more urgent needs, and therefore the responsibility in a comprehensive way. It's something that they cannot afford. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you highlighted two important points, right? First, in terms of this kind of disconnection in between the policymakers and the government and the community, and the expression of community, which can be small businesses, right? And then another point that you illustrate, which is very important, is like sustainability versus growth, which happen in the developing world, right? You know, I remembered back in 2008 when in South America, Josh, I don't know if you are aware of it, we have this kind of like socialist bloc in the actual South American cone. And then, like the president of Ecuador and the president of Bolivia back then, they were trying to give rights to the nature, right? And then emerged, and it was very popular, this concept of buen vivir, which we need to get away from this kind of developing concept of growth, and the development means have access to shelter, a decent job, in healthcare and education. But you have to go beyond and understand development also from the nature perspective. So they were trying, like, from the constitution and from the legal framework, try to give rights to nature and transform an anthropocentric society to a more biocentric society, right? And it's very important what Paola says, because basically growth and sustainability doesn't always match. And I think, as you put it, this is one of the key aspects, right, of challenging the SDG as a framework and to translate it into small businesses and cooperative, right?
Well,
Because
but
sometimes, yeah,
no,
sorry, go
so
ahead.
yeah, because I think, I mean, if we keep thinking that we can grow to, I mean, and please take me in the right way. Of course, it is very important that no one lives with $2 a day, because
Yeah,
that is very important. But if in order to do that, we do it at expenses of the nature, then those $5, $10 that people
Exactly.
we can raise that threshold will not be enough, because the ecological crisis that we are bringing will be as equally bad as living with $2. So we have right now the day, which is the day in which the world uses all the resources that can reproduce in a year, uh, in the beginning of August. 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was at the end of the year. So that means that it's like going to your bank and asking for a loan, and the next month asking for a loan again. And the third time you go, they will say, I cannot give you any more loans because you are not repaying your debts. So we are overusing the resources of the world, which is not we in equally, definitely. It's the the global north using the resources, or yeah, overusing the resources. Because when you see this overshoot day divided between countries, Qatar has it in the beginning of February, and Indonesia or other countries in Southeast Asia have it in December. Um, so it's a very unequal distribution of how we use the resources. So I think it is much more important to being aware of the dark side of growth, and the consequences that this will bring to our societies, not only our economy, um, because that is the underpinning idea in the SDGs, which I think
sure.
is, it's like the poison. It's inside of the framework in that way. So yeah, I have no answer though. But
Okay. Sure. That's very important, because that's when, Josh, like you, bro, you actually looked into the world from a different perspective, right? Because you've been working, like living in the Southeast Asia, understanding the West, creating partnerships across the globe, right? Perhaps you can help us to see a more global perspective from the business perspective, right? So from this point of view, I want to ask you, like, what are the challenges that business face in terms of implementing SDGs? And if you reckon this kind of objective, SDGs as an objective for businesses, are realistic in terms to implementing and not affecting their day-to-day operational businesses and of course their profit.
So, Andres, I would first resonate with what Paula said in terms of growth. Like we need to ask these questions as businesses, that growth at what stake? Is it just growth for the growth's sake at the cost of planetary impact at the cost of the like we talk about this technology, but these mining of these critical minerals coming from these mines in the Africa, what impact that business has on the communities in those mining countries. That's the kind of question that we really need to ask and debate with businesses and make businesses comfortable, because see, businesses are subjected to stock markets, right? So they have to be by design very conscious of any single word they speak out that totally impacts their equity and the market shares. And that's the kind of economic system has pushed us into this darker side of the reality of rampant use of resources, the unconscious leveraging of like the resources that are around us. That's what also bothers businesses, because they were never asked these difficult questions. So there is a way to dive in, because each business can't impact all the SDGs, right? I always say that if you want to achieve really, if the world really wants to achieve all the SDGs and the world we want, that nobody's left behind, than only one SDG, which is gender equity. First, if you give the gender the equity it deserves, then all the other SDGs falls in place, as per my little exposure of working with businesses, working with different stakeholders. Because there is always this limit that men can lead these worlds. The way the man has led the world, we have got into more trouble. So we need to bring we need to bring in the feminine side also into the conversation at the right levels, because in 2024 or 2025, the largest economies of the world are grappling with the whole concept around gender equity. These terminologies that in United States, women can be everything except for the president. That's daunting for the world. Forget about global south or the emerging economies or the underdeveloped economies. Even those countries still date, if can't get the real perspective on the principles of inclusion, equity, and life in harmony with nature, how can you expect it for the global south to be progressive, and the businesses in global south to be progressive to that scale to achieve these SDGs? So first of all, most important aspect that we really need to bring in these businesses is a very universal accepted framework of what inclusion and equality means. And it doesn't mean just for the underprivileged communities that they can support with resources. It starts with their own leadership. It starts with their own employees. First, that framework has to set straight, clear, and equitable. Then automatically the different aspects of the SDG indicators fall in place. But other thing that I have been observing in my conversation with businesses is that businesses are like, they flow with the waves of opportunities. Then sometimes there is this wave of CSR, corporate social responsibilities. You will see that the corporates are pushing their efforts, resources, employees towards CSR. Now businesses have start seeing even the role of multilateral systems like UN in the world. They are questioning, how can we even completely rely on to the framework of designed by a multilateral system that is even not functioning to its expectation, and as it is supposed to perform or function. So these kind of imbalances leads to disconnected relationships, and this disconnection leads to the, I would say, perceived challenges of implementation of SDGs, because like the UN compact, UN Global Compact came that the businesses become part of the UNGC framework, and every end of the year they do all the reporting of how the businesses has impacted each SDGs. The way now businesses are mandated to do their environmental reporting or all the other kinds of reporting. SDGs were never meant to be like you have to bring SDGs in your business. They were never meant to be designed like that. But what I see as a progress with the framework like SDG, that it has inspired shift in governance of implementation. What I mean by shift in governance of implementation is that especially you see these local governments are voluntarily taking efforts to document, to use the data on SDG reporting. How are those local governments performing on each of these criteria, which is a great win. We should never forget that SDG was an aspirational framework, because in the world we live, in the world of reality, there is a stark difference between reality and the aspiration that we want for our world, because it's a hot mess. Yours and mine house is at fire. So first, when my house is at fire, my basic human instinct is to first protect my home. And right now, this is exactly what the mindset in the world is. Everybody is focused on protecting their own territories, protecting their own sovereignty, and that is causing bigger troubles.
Yeah.
This displacement, world has never seen a displacement of the scale that we are seeing right now, with wars in Gaza, Sudan, and Ukraine, and now in this, like this whole energy transition in Bangladesh, energy leadership transition in Syria now. So this is all because of the, I would say, dysfunctional financial and economic global structures made by these global economies. They failed to bring in the impact, the potential impact of, I would say, misrepresentation of the voices of these
Yeah.
people, of these communities, and that leads to all of this challenges. And then we are not able to solve the human problem. We are thinking about solving the bigger problem, which is the climate problem. So we are stuck in the complexity to address what to solve first to bring this holistic change. And I always say that business problem is not a resource problem. I learned that business problem is a human problem. If businesses focus on investing in more human-centric solutions for their growth challenges, businesses automatically by default will impact all these SDGs framework. That's what I have learned. But the businesses continue their quest to solve their resource challenges, which is an artificial problem. It's not a real problem. So I think these kind of philosophical disalignment, and these are globally propagated. It's not that one industry has better benefit over other. It's a global propaganda. That's why these conspiracies comes. That's why I always say, and I have learned from my mentors, is that, yes, if you focus on the human growth, the human aspect of your system would be by default sustainable and addresses all the requirements that a system needs to address to. So we are not paying more attention to that. We are paying more attention to right now, how do you solve the access to technology problem, right? What will the communities do with the access to technology or artificial intelligence if they don't have the basic meals to eat in a day? How can AI transform the poverty gap in the world? I don't think AI can solve the poverty gap. Only humans can solve the poverty gap. But our focus is deviated, shifted from that. And I think for businesses, in one word, is that how businesses can become more human centric. Businesses have done a phenomenal job to become consumer centric, but they have also commoditized consumers. they have forgot that consumers are humans and humans needs a different way to be engaged, treated, and sustained for sustained socioeconomic growth. We are not
Sure.
test cases, Andres, but unfortunately, human beings are dealt as test cases. That's the power of cooperatives. Cooperatives till date, in spite of they not being represented properly in the global economic system as they should be, because their main focus is to be human centric, community centric. Each individual has a vote to say yes and no. Each individual in that system has a voice to take or to represent their what they believe in. So that's the power of cooperative. And I always say that, the world has got into trouble because of competition. The way to bring the world back to the track is to create constructive competition, but to bring in cooperation. And Paula rightly said, 2025 International Year of Cooperation. Recently, India hosted the International Congress on Cooperatives, and India as a country has agreed for its economic growth based on cooperation. So the mandate for India is prosperity through cooperation. Our journey towards prosperity is not based on, I would say, unconscious competition. It's based
Sure.
on conscious cooperation.
Yeah, I think you like have pointed something really important first, and actually I bring the first segment where we're talking about the positive impacts of SDGs or the advance or the progress of it. You were talking about transformation, right? Because first transformation, I know it sounds rhetoric, but it's not really. It comes within, right? If you think about businesses in terms of a living organism, yeah, a living thing, if businesses have to transform with it. And then it connects what you say before, this connection in between understanding others' cultures, others' needs, this kind of lack of empathy towards communities, towards small businesses, and so on. It creates like a shortcut. Hence, when we talk about transformation, we need to, and I agree, we need to transform first this kind of like human mindset. And that connects what Paola was saying about growth and change the way of thinking, right? Because growth nowadays, as we experience growth and sustainability doesn't work together, unfortunately. So we really need to start to advance conversations about a new type of economy, well-being economy, the growth economy. I don't know how to call it, but these conversations has to happen. But then again, SDGs, it seems to be appropriated for maybe um, political purposes, or maybe greenwashing and so on. And as you put it, Josh, is going to the wrong direction because now it kind of seemed like demonized, right? To take care of the planet and so on. It's been demonized, hence it emerged this kind of like bias or fake or disinformation towards the importance of sustainability. So do you guys would argue that SDGs are too idealistic, is an utopia, or do you think perhaps if the execution is enhanced, we can achieve what we project based on these SDGs framework?
Paula, you want to go first? I have a very clear cut, I would say, realization of what SDGs is, but I would love to hear what Paula's perspective is on framework, especially from her cooperative hat that she wears.
Um, so I don't know if I
Do you
don't
think
see
it's
it
too ambitious?
no at all. I think, I mean, it's as Josh was saying, it's this is not a matter of managing resources. We have enough resources in the world to feed everyone, to have a dignified life. Um, However, if 8 people in the world have as many wealth as the half of world population, then we have a different sort of problem. It's not a problem of resources; it's a problem of management and yeah, and how we yeah, exactly, yeah, how we
Distribution, yeah.
distribute that, and also in relation to what you were pointing after to the inequality as one of the challenges. And in that way, I think, I mean, the SDG framework is very useful for making this visible and segment the inequality as a global huge thing, um, and then having a closer picture to the different phases of that inequality is useful because then we can work targeting specifically, or yeah, like directing the actions in that way. But I don't think it's too ambitious at all. And I am and I don't care if it's ambitious or not. We need to do something. Otherwise, we won't have a world where we could live in a couple of years' time.
Mm.
So, and if no one or the people really in a powerful positions don't recognize this urgency, um, we are really in a big problem.
Mm. Sure. I like that. How about you, Josh? What do you reckon?
So one thing is for sure, that we should give this clarity that SDG is just a framework made with the ultimate vision of the world we want, right? And like we should also be realistic about the fact that the ultimate world we want cannot be possible only by businesses playing their role, community being integrated. We need three things in the world for SDGs to really be achieved for like the dream world for us. I think the first and most foremost thing that we need in the world is peace, because the growing conflicts in the world is taking us away from even the idea of achieving the world we want. It is dragging us back to the world we used to be before, where we are coming from. So I think we really need to resolve the ongoing armed conflicts through dialogue, diplomacy, and prevent future conflicts. Without peace, SDG is not possible. That's my complete conviction. Second, we need solidarity. After solidarity, because again, as I said, the whole infrastructure of the architecture of the global international financial structure is not comprehensive enough to include the voices of the developing economies or the underdeveloped economies. So we really need to rethink of a new global international financial architecture that would facilitate the further needs of how SDGs can be achieved, because we all talk about the gap in the SDG investments that leads to not even getting us close to that. So that gap is because of the fractured architecture of the current financial economic system we live in. And the third most important thing, what is required for these SDGs to become a reality, is that we need a surge in implementation. So, like the ruthless implementation, given the first two terms are in place, which is global peace and the solidarity, then very massive investment in more effective partnerships are needed with businesses, with government, with multilateral system, to bring the real implementation with the resources that we have. And then these partnerships would collaborations and partnerships would drive the critical transition across the major challenges like the food challenge that world grapples because of conflicts, the energy problem, the digital connectivity, and more important, unlocking the progress right across the goals. It's not one goal. As I said, SDG 5, if you get a real progress, you unlock the barriers to the achievement of other goals. So I think these three things for me are more critical, but I'm also not very, I would say, skeptic about the framework, because again, like, we all need different frameworks to operate in. So it's a good framework, it's an holistic framework, it's an aspirational framework, but I am for sure, even if by 2030 it seems that we are out of reach to achieve SDGs, but I think it's a backbone of global cooperation, and we need to strengthen multilateral cooperation and set out clear steps for how global community can work together. If we all come together, work together like the way cooperative works, SDG is not a dream. It can be a reality.
Sure. Thanks for that, man. This is very important because then, if you clearly state what is needed to achieve SDGs framework, it's easier to deliver, right? And also, as you put it, it's very important to say that SDGs is only a framework. Sustainability is beyond, is bigger than that, right? So stick to it is a problem. And actually, it comes to our fourth segment, right? I want to talk about misinformation, right? And some political resistance surrounding the SDGs, across the globe. Okay, so we're gonna do a little exercise with you too, right? It's a little game, and I wanna see it's like it would be like a rapid fire question. So you guys have to say whether it's biased, legit, or fake. Okay, I will share some headlines or claims about the SDGs, and you guys will tell me if you think they're either biased, legitimate, or fake, and why. Okay, I have four for you. So the first headline: Agenda 2030, a plan to end national sovereignty and create one world government.
Well, I can start.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely biased because I don't know when this was published exactly, but this is not what is happening. Um, so yeah, and anyways, I don't see creating one world government. I don't see a big issue in that. Uh, who said that having 200 something countries is better than maybe with one we can have, if it's a good one. um, well, I think, and if that help us to remain very attentive to the locality and the area where we live. Globalization as such is something that brought us negative consequences as well as good. But if that help us to, yeah, I don't know. It's a
It's
bias, I would
biased.
say. Yeah.
Okay. Josh.
So same, I totally resonate with Paul. I think it's not even close to that reality, because the current state of world, it's getting even more fragmented. I'm worried that we might have, more than 200 countries coming in the coming times, because the way we are looking at our relationships on borders, it's scary. And I would say, in the ideal world, so the world naturally was not created with borders. We created borders. So if we as human beings have really done good deeds, there should be one world with, no borders and no discrimination and no, global north, global south, no classification, but only a place where human beings coexist. But again, we all live in the world we are part of, so we all contributed consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously to expand that starking gap of inequality. We all are responsible for that in some ways, knowingly or unknowingly. So it's totally a bias in that ways, but I wish once in a lifetime of any generation, at least the next three generation to come, if this even gets closer to what it is interpreted, it'll be a better world than the world we live in, and our generation will be more thankful to us than being sorry about us that we did bad. That's why they have to face the consequences of our actions. So that's what worries me a lot.
Sure. Bias then. Second headline: the SDGs are just corporate greenwashing at a global scale.
So I would say again, like not all the corporations of the world are totally aligned with SDGs. And so again, that's not totally true. But again, like you can leverage any framework or any concept. Even CSR to some extent was perceived or practiced as greenwashing, right? So I I feel it as biased because again, you talk about that left-wing mindset and right-wing mindset. So the extreme mindset would always find a way to say, this is a framework to support businesses and the businesses to greenwash and keep doing what they are doing and just reporting and all of that kind of stuff. But at least it brings some kind of sensitization, right? At least new conversation happening in the boardrooms. At least it's a first step for businesses to reimagine, rethink their role. And I heard, at least I can say that in the global CEOs club, I'm missing that name. They changed the definition of the purpose of business. The globally accepted definition of business was to maximize shareholders.
To maximize profit. Yeah, yeah. I think we lost Josh a little bit, but it's fine. He'll be back. Paola, what do you think? Is it bias?
Yes, yeah, between bias and legit, because I think if what we have behind that statement is related to the idea of growth, and this what we have already discussed. Um, if we don't go to the roots of the problem, which is growth, it is a sort of greenwashing. Um, so yeah, I
Yeah.
would say it's in between.
Here you go. Josh is back.
Mhm.
Hello, amigo. We lost you for a while. Don't worry. Paola was just actually elaborating on the second headline. She says it's in between bias and legit. You okay, Josh? Can we go to the third one?
Yes.
Perfect. The third headline then. The SDGs aim to impose global taxes on developing nations.
Interesting. I'm thinking.
Well, again,
So,
taxes.
like,
Go on, go
yeah,
on.
go ahead, Paul.
No,
Just a chain of thought.
taxes are not a bad thing. It's just how you use that taxes for after. Um, and I guess if I'm guessing, so if developing countries pay taxes, I assume that developed countries will pay higher taxes if it's a fair taxation system. And well, that could be good. I mean, except for those who do not want to pay taxes. But if those taxes are used for are redistributed in a in a following justice, in a comprehensive way of understanding justice, and yeah, equity, why not?
So it would be legit one.
Mhm. Well, I don't know, yeah, but I don't know what's behind the statement. I say that that could be a good thing.
What do you think, Yash?
So for someone like me, Andres, who is an unapologetic optimist person, I I totally don't know what's behind this headline, but practically, no nation has agreed to impose taxes on not being able to, you know, either report or been able to track the progress on SDGs. So, like practically, technically, I have not heard. So I may be not totally educated on the progress of what has happened. So I can't comment on that, but definitely I love the concept of the imposition of right taxes that makes you more conscious and keeps you under check. And as countries, there are several countries in the world, because of their taxation system, the life of the people in those countries is beautiful. So taxes are good in many ways, but what I read recently, the developed countries have not been able to even justify the basic healthcare to their people in spite of all their economic growths that they have accumulated. So that's why I'm worried about this fact as it's legit or not, So I can't say it's legit, but I would dream for it to get legit, basically.
Yeah. Cool. The last headline, it would be implementing the SDGs will lead to mass job losses in key industries.
Wow. I don't think so. I would say if it would have been on, some technologies, AI and other stuff, I might have given a thought of, this replacing jobs. But SDGs are, I would say, like not that cruel yet.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you see the sources of these articles, the first one was from Forbes, the second was from The Guardian, the third one was from Fox News, and the last one was the CNN. So, it comes, when we started this ideological battle, so I would say maybe all of them are biased. But, to finalize this segment, guys, when you engage with the stakeholders, from the cooperative perspective, and in your case, Rush, that you work with different stakeholders, how do you address skepticism or perhaps resistance fueled by this kind of misinformation or bias claims? Wow, there is
Yeah.
a silence in the.
Well, this is a important and a deep question, Andres. I just don't want to jump on it because it's very important to keep
Like,
yourself sane while we are in the process of implementation. Like the
sure,
people who are in the business of implementation have to be very sensitized to how the information, misinformation can lead to consequences on the not only just the results but the sentiments of the stakeholders and the communities we work in. So you know what, I am of a firm belief that especially with human beings, and no matter any system, we are all human beings. If we are on a right track and our deeds are correct with right intentions, then no matter how misguiding information floats in the world of internet now, it would not distract you as a leader, as an organization, to continue to do what you want to do and what you are doing. You might get delayed, you might get sometimes derailed, but you would not get out of track. So,
sure.
like someone for like me, I keep the sources that I consume knowledge, information, news is very limited. And then I like to go into the depth and map it with the reality of actions. That's when we make, say, this is what we read from the ABC source. This is what the pattern of implementation or action has to say with the data. And then you mix your intellect with your intuition. And that's the right decision, I would say, the recipe for a a more equitable decision, I can say. You cannot be 100% right all the time, but you can try to be most close to being equitable and inclusive when you take those calls, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I don't know about the misinformation. No, I
I
don't
mean, it's
think
latent.
it's
Yeah. I mean, it's actually latent. Like, okay, we are conducting a study, okay, about rural enterprises and the SDG agenda in the north of Spain, particularly in the wine region, okay. And first of all, we have conducted about 400, yeah, surveys, okay, and we have about 30 interviews. And first of all, guys, I mentioned this in another podcast, but we just keep in analyzing data, and it's very interesting because first of all, people have no idea what the SDGs are stand for. Okay, that's for sure. First of all, secondly, small businesses, in a context as Spain, which about 98%, Josh, you would be impressed. 98% are SMEs in the country, 98%. And about 87% out of these 98% are micro enterprises. People are not busy, are too busy to think about this kind of like meso agenda, right? So, it's hard because they have no idea. Another finding, which is very important, just perhaps to see how we talk about this, is like the wine industry, right? Like they were like, first of all, thanks to the SDGs, that less consumption of wine, right? Because people are more health conscious, self-conscious about alcohol. They do more sports. They drink less alcohol, and actually, like wine consumption in the world is decreasing, and they are super worried about it. And they have a business to face, they have employments to pay, and they blame the SDG agenda because it's like people are more self-conscious about health, right? The food industry, agriculture, right? It's like if you've been practicing agriculture using pesticides, in a non-organic way, which is more profitable, this is the only way you do know how to do it, and also like produce certain like products, fruits and vegetables can be expensive if you do organically. They're also affected. So it's very interesting to see like when you bring into the table different perceptions and perspective based upon their experiences. So as you guys put it before, it's a change of mentality, man. I mean, sustainability or sustainable world versus growth or
but for me
survival, right?
but for me it's much more related the misinformation and all that related to your original question is much more related to the lack of real anchorage with the reality of small micro businesses, uh, rather than, I mean, yeah, they are they care about the next month because or the next couple of months. That's all what they have secured.
I
um
think for them, which have been, in some sectors negatively impacted, they sometimes they believe in this misinformation because they identify themselves towards it, right? They say, oh yeah, definitely they want to finish to with agriculture because they put more legal legalities into our operations. They force us to use certain seeds and use pesticides, and and they start to kind of like fight in between them and the consumers, because I don't know in your context, guys, but at least in Europe, in the UK, and a little bit of southern Spain, consume organically is very expensive. So, the
Yeah.
power of buying, I mean, a family, like let's say, working class, I don't think they could afford it, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't, man. They couldn't. So, like it happens to me, like for instance, when I go to a conference and I've heard some of the academics, oh no, it's like they have to go to these kind of like social markets, and we should produce like this and that. And I'm like, guys, first of all, from the agricultural point of view, it's very expensive, and then from the consumer point of view, it's super expensive to eat healthy, right? Think about it. Health is expensive.
Most expensive. Absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of time, in terms of money. Look, if you guys want to look healthy, you need to invest time to go to the sports, to go to the gym. You need time for it. That's for
Totally.
sure. Then, if you want to eat organic food or non processed food without additives, it's very expensive,
Yeah.
right? So, like a middle, I would say a lower family, they wouldn't be able to make it, man.
Yeah.
You at least the other day I read a couple of articles, and if you really want to follow this kind of like health trend, you have a household has to earn about 6.5 or 7K euros per month.
Wow.
That's crazy, man. I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe it was
Thing.
biased. I don't know. It could be biased.
Going
But
back to misinformation,
yeah,
and
I don't know.
well, it's difficult to think who would be benefited from that type of misinformation. But yeah, I mean, the same happens in Argentina. And if you work for social economy organization business, yes, definitely, it's tough. Um, no.
Yeah. Okay, guys, let's go to the last segment. And we just ended up with these conspiracy theories behind it, because it drives me mad. I have to confess that. Okay, so looking forward, the future of SDGs. Okay, Paola, what shifts or innovations do you think are needed for cooperatives to play a larger role in achieving the SDGs?
Mhm. Well, I think that the shift needs to be made by the system, uh, in recognition and in changing moving away from this market mentality, that and the velocity that and the financialization and of the economy, and the velocity that it requires, because we need to the shift that we need to make is to go much more slow, in relation to growth, much more grounded in relation to the locality, the area where we are, not thinking in these global terms, which are so abstract that we cannot really grasp, that goes beyond our capacity as individuals. I mean,
Yeah.
um, so in that sense, I think if the context makes a change, then cooperatives can definitely play a much bigger role. Um, but otherwise, I mean, I don't think that cooperatives can make any innovation to move this transition forward faster, because yeah, it's related to what I said in the beginning. They are already doing it, so we cannot expect. And as Josh was saying, I totally agree on the transformative capacity of businesses, but that has a limit. So if and the cooperatives have a limit so if there is no change in the system, which in my opinion is what we need to achieve sustainability or more sustainable way of living, uh, then the role of cooperatives, we know what it is. It's what had been for the last 200 years. So in that sense, I think, yeah, if the context changes, then much more support can be granted to cooperatives to keep developing this human-centered economic point of view. Uh, there is no point on having an economy producing whatever if there is no people employed to pay for those goods. Although with the financial economy we have a different type of discussion. Um, but yeah, I think it's the shift that needs to be done by the system. And I don't know, I mean, how can we trigger that transformation? Well, as a consumers, supporting the type of businesses that we think are contributing to a different way of producing. I don't know, that's, or I mean, is the our role as educators. I mean, I like to think that in a business school, we are training the future CEOs of companies. And that's why I think the role we are doing is important, because otherwise they will be doing business as usual because that's what they know. And yeah, there is no tomorrow otherwise if we don't transform the economy now.
Sure. Fantastic. Thank you for that. And Josh, um, based on this kind of like practitioner perspective, what role do cross-sector collaborations would play in accelerating progress towards the SDGs? And if you think innovation in terms of partnership would be the key, you know, to achieving this SDG framework.
Before I answer this, I would really love to add to Paula's point, especially because post-COVID, Paula, you would be glad to know that I have been, you know, developing myself as the biggest champion. Now I can say I'm a practitioner and the biggest believer of the role of cooperatives to bring the transformation in the world. And I have been debating with a lot of, I would say, seasoned cooperative leaders the fact that, why, in spite of having such a rich history, such a strong network of people, why are we not equally in vogue, in demand, the way businesses are? And where I am right now, currently in my journey of what I call as reimagining the cooperative ecosystem at the intersection of public, private, social sector partnerships, is that we really need to work to make cooperatives sexy. And what I mean by sexy is the way the tech industry, the financial sector has made it appealing for the younger generation to look at these sectors as career of choice. Why can't we make cooperatives as a career of choice for these young CEOs of future in our B schools, in our classes, in our communities? That's something which the global cooperative network, I think, has something missing in really how do you make cooperative sexy. If I were being given an opportunity, a chance to be in a room with the cooperative decision makers of the world, my biggest, you know, submission would be that bring younger generations in the fold of cooperatives and make cooperatives sexy, so that when you start thinking of a new business, instead of a LLC or a non-profit, you think of registering it as a cooperative. And that's my biggest dream right now, and I would love to talk to you more on, how can I collaborate with you there. But now to answer that question, Andres, I think most important thing is that we need hyper focused development agendas. Like SDGs are like too big. We are human beings. Like most of us are not capable to look at the totality system as whole, and that's fine. We all don't need to be looking like that. So what we need is hyper focused development agendas, and for hyper focused development agendas to be implemented, practiced, we need more creative cross-sector collaboration. And what I mean by cross-sector collaboration is a single example which right now is very active and evolving and growing in Europe, and I'm expecting those conversations also to happen during the annual general meeting of the World Economic Forum, is that how can we use the power of social procurement to create spaces for cross-sector collaboration to accelerate the SDG framework. What do I mean by that is that the government systems, the private sector have trillions of dollars in their procurement agendas. If they start putting a portion of their budgets to procure from socially conscious businesses, cooperatives, social enterprises, it will directly impact and accelerate the SDGs. No rocket science. It's a very clear-cut, practical pathway to achieve SDGs. Everything private sector can't do, everywhere private sector can't enter. Private sector have their expertise, social sector have their expertise, and the multilateral sector have their expertise. The moment you all get together and create a business case which is a win-win-win, win for corporation, win for the community, and win for the environment, it is meant to be, worth workable. And so social procurement is one approach of multi-sectoral collaborations to advance SDGs. And second thing I believe is that the power of engaging the top talent of these large corporations on ground with social enterprises, with cooperatives, and giving them the exposure. So, what cooperatives and the NGOs and social businesses will gain is that the way these large corporate employees bring the mindset, the expertise to solve problems and bring in that scale, they would bring that kind of thinking thought process to the leaders and CEOs of these social impact organization, yeah, social solidarity organization. That ways, this system gives exposure of community needs, the thinking to these corporate employees, and they get is these skill sets, these corporate employees. So again, it's a win-win. So in my theory of social innovation, innovations are always where you create spaces where different stake partners can still come collaborate and win. You know, that's what I mean in my journey to create those spaces where there is a win, for different stakeholders with different stakes and different interests. I can't expect you in the same vision to be seeing the world the way I see the world. No, that's my problem. But what we can work in a way is that where our commonality lies, I think that's where we should start that engagement. And that's why I say the skill-based volunteering work, the social procurement are the ways to bring acceleration in the SDGs and also create more robust cross-sector collaboration.
If I can
Sure.
pinpoint, I think also about social innovation, the importance is creating new behaviors and new relationships. And in connection to how cooperatives can contribute, well, expanding the cooperative mindset and expanding that collaborative approach, it's definitely a way to innovate, which will accelerate the transition.
Fantastic, guys. thank you for us today. It was a very interesting conversation. I want to thank both of you. A huge thank you to Yash and Paola for your insights. I think we cover really interesting aspects from transformation, collaboration, the lack of interconnection in between these fields, how far small businesses, including cooperatives, are from the SDG framework because it's too huge. As Yash put it, it's huge. We, as humans, we have a very limited capacity to see the world. Also, the importance of, understand that the SDGs is also a manifestation from the cooperatives, right? Josh also point out that he loves cooperatives and he see the value of it. The power of businesses in creating good, if it's well managed. We also go through conspiracies and misinformation, which sometimes can create inequalities and perhaps it creates like debate, unnecessary debates among different actors. So I hope our community learned a little bit more about SDGs. I would put all the information about Paola and Rush in the description. Don't forget always to follow us and check out all the podcasts. And thank you guys. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you, Paula. It was a delight to be part of this conversation. And most importantly, I'm glad that practitioner and academician are on same page. The world would be world would be a more better place when we can bring such more synergies around the world where, we bring the power of academics and the pleasure of practicing together, and then we accelerate towards the journey we each aim for. So Paula, it's a pleasure
So
to be with you on this interesting conversation.
yes, totally. Thank you, Andres, for bringing us together and for seeing the value of bringing two people who have ever seen each other, and
As I'm a connector,
yeah,
That's
definitely.
cool. Okay, guys, this is our episode on sustainable talk show in our Invisible Experts podcast. Let's take a photo to say goodbye, please. Wait.
Bye.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Goodbye,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you
Be
very much,
well. Take
Andres.
care.
Bye,
Bye.
Raj. Nice meeting
Bye,
you.
Paula.
Gosh. Okay, goodbye.